Turkish army opened up with tank and artillery fire on Greek Cypriot positions near the Nicosia airport.
I'm on an island in the Mediterranean, and I'm at an airport on the runway right now, actually. But this airport is completely empty. It's totally still. There's no one here. It's eerie, it's empty, it's falling apart. The reason this airport is a ghost town is because we are literally inside of a border. This is Cyprus. It is an island that's just under Turkey, just to the left of Lebanon and Israel. So yeah, I'm locked inside of a border right now, which I'll explain what I mean by that in a little bit. But the short answer is that this is a gray zone. It is a no man's land, and in fact, challenges what we even mean by the word country. This airport used to be a thriving hub of international travel, people everywhere. And then that changed. It changed because of an invasion.
The Turkish air attacks came sporadically but swiftly. The main targets were Greek Cypriot police and National Guard buildings, and above all, the airport, where there was some heavy fighting today.
The Greek Cypriots, sizably outnumbered by the Turks, were able to put up little resistance.
And not that long ago, we're talking like the 1970s, it was that conflict that locked this place into a no man's land, into a conflict that still continues to this day. This airport is not the story here. This is just one piece of a huge puzzle. It's a puzzle and a situation that I have been thinking about for years, the better part of a decade. I've been staring at this place, thinking about it, looking at it, and I'm finally here. I'm finally here to look at it in the face, to understand it, to talk to the people, to look at its story, and to try to piece together an explanation of how this island was divided, not between two countries, but divided into four.
The island where Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, was born out of sea spray.
Cyprus is Britain's base in the Middle East, and the Middle East is under constant pressure.
In addition to clashes with rebelling Greek Cypriots, the British are faced with keeping the peace between the Turkish and Greek factions.
Sizably outnumbered by the Turks, were able to put up little resistance.
The Greeks had no hope of victory. Hate and fear now rule Cyprus.
I came to this island because I wanted to understand something I've been thinking about for years. I studied it back in grad school, but never really understood it. So after years of reading about this conflict and looking at it on a map, I came. I met up with some friends who were also traveling in this region and who also wanted to learn, to expand their perspectives on this poorly understood conflict.
So you say the island is divided into four, but what are the four parts?
To understand that, you have to look at the map. Even though the country of Cyprus is a member of the EU and their flag literally has an island on it, it has the entire island on it. The Republic of Cyprus actually looks like this. It only takes up 60% of the actual island. It's made up of mostly people who identify as Greek. So this is it. This is the country of Cyprus. Only controls this portion of the island. It's just 60% of the island.
Wait, okay, so that's not the whole island. What is the remaining portion?
The remaining 40% is complicated. First off, you have a small fraction of this island that is controlled by, wait for it, the British. The British. Yes, you guessed it.
I saw that coming.
Yes, didn't we all? The British. They mainly use it for military purposes. And then you have this strip right here that is owned by no country. This is controlled by the United Nations. It's a buffer zone, a ceasefire line set up in the 60s and 70s to stop the fighting. Now the elephant in the room here, which is the rest of this map. All of this up here is controlled by the self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. According to the UN and to almost every other country, this space is not a country. It's a self-declared country that is occupying half of this island almost. But if you go to this place, it feels like a country. It has like a government that builds roads and infrastructure and has political parties and elections. So it's
So it is a country.
It's kind of a country.
How can you be kind of a country?
This land up here is occupied because there was an invasion in the 70s. And at that time, Greeks and Turks had to separate. They left their homes completely empty, thinking maybe they would come back, but they never did.
As the Turks advance, the number of Greek Cypriot refugees pouring into the Deucalion base is growing rapidly.
There's this city in what is now the occupied north that used to be this like beautiful resort town. When the invasion happened, the people fled. There was a bombing on this town, and they all fled. And they thought, okay, once the bombing's over, we'll come back. And they never did. It's been 47 years, and they have not gone back. They left their homes, they left food in their refrigerators, they left their pictures, their jewelry just in their homes. I met a guy who left that day. He was 33. He took his 2 children and they drove. And after months of talking to the Turkish military, we got permission to go back with him to visit his old home and to talk about that experience.
Wait, how could this city possibly go from idyllic resort to a ghost town, basically?
That is the question I've been thinking about for a lot of years now. And to understand it, it really helps to go back. The first thing to know, and the context of this island, is that everyone wanted it, always. This place is located so perfectly in the Mediterranean at the crossroads of Europe and the Middle East and Northern Africa that it is so perfectly strategically located. Everyone wanted it. It was the Persians and Alexander the Great. And then of course the Romans show up with their Jesus religion and do that thing. You get the point. Like, Cyprus was just a strategic pawn being conquered and ruled by one empire after another for literally thousands of years. And that gets us up to 500 years ago, which is closer to the root of today's conflict, when the empire from Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, came over. They threw out the current empire, which is the Venetians, and they came in. And they're like, the Ottoman Empire now rules Cyprus.
So I don't mean to interrupt because this is all fascinating, but I have always had the question of whether Turkey is named after the bird or if it's the other way around, and this is just something that's bugged me forever, and I figured I'd ask you.
I mean, we were talking about like the conquering of this land, but we can talk about turkeys for a little bit. So the answer to that is Turkey, the bird, is definitely named after Turkey, the empire, okay? The way that it works is that Turkic people used to bring this bird into Europe and sell it, and they would buy it and they would call it a turkey fowl. Oh, there's like this turkey fowl, it's this bird coming from Turkey. When Europeans arrived to North America and they saw what we call turkeys today, they're like, oh, that looks just like the turkey fowl from like back in Europe that the Turks used to bring over.
Oh, wow.
Let's call it a turkey, even though it's a totally different animal than the thing the Turks were bringing over. And that's how we got turkeys. So the thing you eat for Thanksgiving or whatever is like named after turkey. Yeah. No.
So not that dumb of a question then.
Okay, do you feel satisfied with your turkey answer? Because we can move on about the point of the video, which is about like how the island was divided into 4. Or do you want to keep talking about turkeys? Because I could talk about turkeys like all day.
No, I think it's okay. Yeah,
okay.
You go for it.
You're satisfied?
Thanks
okay.
for taking the time.
Okay, so we're at the point where the Ottoman Empire, the Turkey Empire, owns Cyprus, okay? And this is where Turkic people arrive to this island, and they find mostly Greek people. Greek Christians, Turkic Muslims, different cultures. And yet, over the years, they made a harmonious society together where they lived next to each other in the same villages and towns in peace. let's get to modern day, because it's like the late 1800s, Ottoman Empire's crumbling, like super crumbling. And who is the new kid on the block that is not crumbling but is rising? The British.
So it's not that surprising to me that the next part of the story is the British coming into a part of this, but why would they want this specific island?
There was particularly this one little strip of water that made all the difference. The Suez Canal was this new man-made canal that cut the time from Britain to India like in half. Like, it was so much easier to get to India, one of their major colonies. And Britain was like, we need to control that. And oh, Cyprus is right there next to the Suez Canal. Like, it's a perfect lily pad for us to have.
But the great importance of Cyprus can be seen from the map. Important little island in the Mediterranean. It has become a strategic center in the Middle East zone of this world war.
So this is the big turning point in the story. The British own Cyprus. It is one of their colonies, and they're doing what the British do well, which is like they're making maps, they're doing demographics, and they're like, oh, you are Turkish Muslims and you are Greek Christians, and they're like separating people by like identity, just sort of on paper. The people who've been living here for thousands of years and being conquered by every empire you can imagine finally start to get fed up with all of this.
One British army truck is bombed, killing 2 soldiers and wounding 12.
By the 1950s, Cypriots were done with British rule, and they had risen up in violent attacks against the British. The British realized it was time to go home. And it looked like Cypriots, for the first time, would actually be able to govern themselves instead of being tossed around by outside powers. But the Greek Cypriots didn't want independence. They actually wanted to join Greece. This was a political movement called Enosis. Meanwhile, the Turkish Cypriots didn't want to be a part of Greece. They didn't want to become even more of a minority. They instead wanted to divide the island into 2 new independent countries, one for Greek Cypriots and one for Turkish Cypriots. This is what a power vacuum will do to people. When the fate of who's going to be in control is up for grab, people latch onto their groups and inflate their identities to divide themselves from the other side. These were no longer just Cypriots like they had been for centuries. Now they had to choose a team, Team Turkey or Team Greece. Right, so this is the climax. This is actually where the conflict becomes a big deal.
1955 saw Sir John Harding as governor and commander-in-chief attempting to reconcile Greek and Turkish viewpoints. All British proposals, however, were rejected, and a long period of riots and outrages followed.
The British realized that these divisions between Turks and Greeks on the island that they had helped create were now getting out of control. So they pulled a page out of their old playbook.
And a new British plan, described as an adventure in partnership.
The plan was a classic one, to gather in London for a few days with a few leaders and outside powers and decide for the Cypriots how their country was going to be run. And that's what they did. They all sat in a room and they wrote a constitution for Cyprus. And Greece and Turkey were like both in the room, and they were like, we know that you sort of want to like join Greece maybe, or maybe you want to have your own country. You're going to get neither of those. You're going to be an independent country. And we're going to create this really clever constitution where the president has to be Greek, but the vice president has to be Turkish, and there has to be like a certain number of Greeks and Turks, and like they created this like really clever constitution that was going to like make everyone happy in theory. And then they were like, you're going to be independent, but we, the British, get to stay here with our bases, and Greece and Turkey get to kind of have power still. Like if something goes awry, like they can swoop in if they really need to. That was like a caveat to this agreement that they made in London. And in 1960, it happened.
Midnight in Nicosia, and Sir Hugh Foot entering Parliament is followed by Archbishop Makarios, who is to take over as first President of Cyprus. So representatives of the 2 Cypriot communities and of Greece, Turkey and Britain begin the signing ceremony. There are many documents to be signed.
Do any of us think that the British crafting a constitution that's like cleverly put together to make everyone get along is really going to work? No, right?
That sounds extremely flimsy.
It's very flimsy. It's
Telling other people how they should structure their country
is never really works. And it's like, we've seen that like quite a few times. It's like, is anyone gonna learn that? Unsurprisingly, the whole, we wrote you a constitution that says you should all get along thing didn't work out, and tensions between Greeks and Turks started to heat up.
For some time, hatred between the Greek and Turkish elements had been building up. Under such conditions, it takes more than a treaty to preserve the peace.
I have this amazing map. I mean, actually, you should see this. Remember that I mentioned that like Greeks and Turks sort of live together. As this constitution isn't working out, violence against Turks, who were always the minority, led them to leave their home, and they start to gather into these little enclaves around the country.
The Turkish Cypriots were declaring that it would be impossible ever again to live in harmony with their Greek compatriots.
And so the map went from looking like this to looking like this.
But the strategic island continues to be the scene of daily violence and bloodshed.
Over in Greece, the new military government saw this happening and thought that this would be a moment to swoop in and take over the government of Cyprus and try to realize this dream of Cyprus being united with Greece. And that's when Turkey's like, Greece, you violated the agreement. We weren't supposed to swoop in on the island unless there was something really wrong. And so we're gonna swoop in because we technically on paper say that we can come in and restore the peace. Well, they did a lot more than restore the peace. Turkey swoops in and starts taking over the north in a full-blown invasion with bombs and tanks and military troops hitting the beaches with guns, like a full-blown invasion, and they start just taking over the north of the island. And the people start fleeing, the Greeks, who realize that Turkey's actually invading. And Turkey feels justified because they feel like Greece did it first. And so they just keep going.
Smoke from the battle rose high over the capital city. The Greek Cypriots, sizably outnumbered by the Turks, were able to put up little resistance.
I've been glued to these early reports of the invasion of the island of Cyprus by Turkey. There's this one journalist from the UK named Jonathan Dimbleby who was one of the first on the ground when all of this was happening. And he captures the feelings of the people who had to flee their homes to their side of the line.
We didn't take anything with us.
In these reports, you start to hear two totally different narratives, and these will go on to be the roots of the modern day conflict on the island of Cyprus. The first narrative is the Greek narrative. From their perspective, this is an invasion to their country, a theft of their property. Turkey was invading their sovereign territory and forcing them to leave land that was rightfully theirs.
It is unlikely that the Turks will allow them back. And there is no promise that they will be compensated for their confiscated homes and businesses.
It is as if the Greek Cypriot world has come to an end.
We prefer to be dead than to live under the Turkish authority.
But for Turkish Cypriots, this was not an invasion, this was salvation. Turkish Cypriots had suffered immense violence and brutality as minorities on the island at the hand of their Greek compatriots. And now Turkey was swooping in to save them, to protect them. That's why Turkish Cypriots call this the peace operation.
When I saw the tanks, I forget my unhappiness. I was very happy because my life was saved, my children's life was saved, and my people, I mean the Turks, was all safe. I'm very happy, of course.
People, the Turkish population feel more safe, secure, because the Turkish army is there to protect them.
After 3 days of an unstoppable offensive, the Turkish army seems to have grabbed just about all the land it wants on Cyprus, at least in the northern and northeastern parts of the island.
And then the Turks in the north declared a new country. They were like, we are now the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, a new country. It's effectively just Turkey by another name. To stop the fighting, the UN carved out these twin lines that cut right through the capital of Nicosia. They stretch across the whole island, a buffer zone to stop the violence. And this establishes the lines we know today, with the Republic of Cyprus controlling all of this, the self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus up here, then of course the British with the land that they held on to when Cyprus became independent, and then this UN buffer zone, which locks within its boundaries the airport, along with people's homes, businesses, and farms.
this is an island divided into four.
In one way only are Greek and Turk alike. They both now belong to a nation of refugees.
One of the reasons I came here was because I wanted to see what this looks like after years of looking at it on a map. What does it feel like for the people to pick up and leave and flee to their side of this new boundary, abandoning their lives and communities?
We're about to go into northern Cyprus for the first time. Here we go.
As you drive through the occupied north, you see a lot of churches like this.
I'm in a village where Greek Cypriots used to live. But in 1974, they fled south, leaving this village empty. The Turkish Cypriots who were in the south fled north and arrived to this village to find empty homes and this Christian church. And they converted it into a mosque so that they could continue their religious practices. But eventually, they built a new mosque right next door, and they left this church totally abandoned, where it lays today, falling apart. Both sides suffered immense losses, and now empty buildings are the most visceral, solid symbol of that loss. These abandoned churches are peppered all throughout the occupied north.
But perhaps the most haunting symbol of this switching of sides happened here, in that thriving Greek tourist town called Famagusta.
Famagusta was the tourist resort of the island, the major port. Much of the wealth of Greek Cyprus was based here. Last weekend, the Greeks fled in panic before the Turkish tanks. They have abandoned all that they have, and they won't return. Now, the town is deserted.
We're about to go in. I've been thinking about this place for the better part of a decade, and we're about to go in.
The reason I spent months trying to get access to film in this ghost town wasn't just to capture it, but rather to understand the human tragedy that happened here. So I asked this man to come with me. His name is Mr. Takis. He's a Greek Cypriot who was my age back in 1974. He lived here in Famagusta. He owned hotels. He was in the tourism industry. But when Turkey invaded, he did what everyone else did in this town. He left with his family. And today, he's returning for the first time ever.
I mean, this is not easy to bear. It brings out anger, it brings out confusion, it brings out disappointment. My wife refused to come.
Yeah.
I came with my daughters today. I came with them, but they tell me, don't talk.
Yeah.
I cannot connect.
Can you paint a picture to me on what Famagusta was like?
The economy was so strong here, and not only economically, Johnny, but culturally, educationally. It was a wonderful period.
I asked Mr. Takis if he would be comfortable showing me his old home. So we started walking through what used to be his entire world. The cafe he used to come to often, his brother's old house, where he went to school.
I spent some of my best years here.
Wow. The school is now boarded up and covered with Turkish and TRNC flags.
To see this in this situation makes me very, very sad.
As we walked through this ghost town, I kept trying to get Mr. Takis to go back to the Famagusta of before the invasion and to point out the places that he had good memories from.
What do you remember about that time?
But after a while, he finally just stopped me.
Johnny, I told you before, I cannot connect. You are asking about my memories.
Yeah.
They don't bring out the full memories I want to describe because there is a reservation. This is not the town I lived. This is not the town that I was proud of.
Yeah.
This is not the town that has a tremendous history and success. It's unbelievable.
On that day that everyone had to flee, you thought you'd be coming back.
Yes, for sure. Everybody who left thought that they are going away for 2-3 days. They didn't take anything more than clothes and food.
We walked through the city deep in conversation, and then Mr. Takis' friend who was with us signaled that we were getting close to the house, the one he hadn't seen since he fled all those years ago. Mr. Takis didn't pick up that we were getting so close, and when he looked up, he realized we were here.
Tell me about this building.
What shall I say?
I could tell he felt caught off guard, and I began to regret having set this whole thing up.
You didn't prepare me.
I was subjecting this man to a traumatic reopening of his old wounds. Also, I could make my video about the conflict. It started to not feel right, but he assured me that we could keep going and that he wanted to do this.
No, I want to go on the other side.
Go from the beach.
Let's go from the beach.
He didn't want me to see his home from this angle, from this bombed out street. Instead, he wanted to see it from the other side, from the beach, the part of this town that still has some semblance of its former glory.
Not from here, from the
other side.
From the other side. I didn't realize we have reached the house.
Yeah. It looks like there's an entrance over here, maybe.
Now you will get an idea why it was so popular, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen the beach yet.
This is famous sandy beach of Famagusta.
As we walked towards his house, now from the beach side, it was clear that Mr. Takis still felt deep pride for this place, this beach, this city.
In certain areas there is even turquoise water.
It's stunning, it's beautiful.
And though his city and his property and his stories are now a ghost town, occupied by an invading power, when you're on this beach, you don't feel it as much.
Beaches like this.
Yeah.
There are not many in the world.
No, there really aren't.
Especially with turquoise water.
And then, after a moment walking along this beach, we finally approached his home.
This is the first time you're seeing this?
First time I see it after 47 years. It scares me. It's I cannot connect in the sense that what I see doesn't bring you out all those nice memories and the good time that you had.
Yeah.
You have to close your eyes and then it all comes back.
Famagusta was the tourist resort of the island. All this belonged to the Greeks.
Famagusta this morning was a ghost town.
It is unlikely that the Turks will allow them back.
You didn't prepare me. My wife still refuses to come.
Yeah.
Because it's painful. I'm come here to do what? Like now, we see it and I cannot go into it.
Yeah.
What is the purpose? I'm not a tourist, it's my home.
Yeah.
It's my town. And I come here and you can go here, you cannot go there. You can see your house from distance. It's a torture. It's a torture. I know it's difficult for everybody to get into somebody else's shoes, but I'm sure you appreciate. Here's a lot. Here's a lot. Here's a lot. It's not right.
I watched Mr. Takis take a photo with his daughters, who he had brought to see the house they almost grew up in. They stood in front of the Turkish military border that bars them from actually going inside. And in that moment, I felt a profound sadness for it all. Unlike anything I had felt in the years of studying this conflict.
Those conversations are so important because this isn't just a international relations issue. This is like a human issue. This is like people and their identity and their homes being lost because of great power conflicts. To me, it's much more important to have those types of conversations than just to be zoomed out looking at a map.
Both Greek and Turkish Cypriots suffered immense violence and loss of their homes and communities in 1974 and the years leading up to it. And throughout this series, I want to shed light not just on this history, but what it feels like to live in this place today. A country divided into four, full of buffer zones and barriers and division. At the end of the day, this is a division that was constructed by outside powers, which is the story of Cyprus, the story of a strategically placed island that everyone wanted and was ripped apart purely because of where it was located.
Okay, well, you made it through episode 1 of Uncharted, this pilot series of something that I want to do a lot more of. There are 3 more episodes, so this is just the beginning. This is a new form of journalism that I am pushing, and I'm really grateful to the sponsor who supported it, which is Cometeer. Cometeer is kind of blowing my mind. They are a completely different version of coffee than anything I've ever experienced. The way it works is that Cometeer works with some of the best artisanal roasteries around the world. And they make beautiful, wonderful coffee. They brew it themselves, but then they immediately flash freeze it. Like they freeze it in these insanely low temperatures to like seal in the freshness and the aromas and the flavors of this roasted coffee. And then they put it in these little metal capsules and send them to your house frozen. They show up, you pull them out of these capsules, you put them into a cup with hot water, and you have delicious coffee that is like the coffee that was brewed. I mean, it's brilliant, and it tastes really good. Listen, I'm a big coffee guy, and I like to think that I have like the art of the pour over down with like my scale and like my timer and all this stuff. Honestly, it takes a long time, which is fine on a weekend, but like during the week, like I sort of want a more convenient option. I could pay for a coffee shop to make it and have it delivered to my house, which costs me a lot of money, or I could pay way less and have a really good cup of coffee that is reliable and sustainably packaged and all of this stuff through Cometeer. Cometeer is kind of a new thing. They're not fully open to the public yet. There's some wait list. If you want to bypass that waitlist, there's a link in my description. It is cometeer.com/Johnny Harris. That allows you to bypass the waitlist and get 50% off your first purchase, which makes this like $1 per cup, which is insanely cheap for the quality of coffee you're getting. So if this is interesting to you, go to the link in my description. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gives you that 50% off and allows you to bypass the waitlist. I feel really excited that I discovered this and will be using it for the foreseeable future. So thank you, Cometeer, for sponsoring this video, and thank you all for being here. There are 3 more episodes of Uncharted coming to you in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for those. See you later.